This is kind of a niche book I created after reading a series of different pieces of literature, and I started to find that all of these different books were screaming about an urgent problem arising in society. AI is so accessible to so many people. Genetic engineering is actually something you could even do in your own home now, and is already being done by the wealthy people. In game theory, there's this idea of zero sum. There's always a loser when someone else is winning. A limited amount of resources, and that in order for someone to win or come up, that another must lose. But a lot of what I've been reading from these various writers is that we can't be approaching human civilization that way. Otherwise, it is going to result in the wealthy creating bunkers and needing to go underground while everyone else perishes from climate change. Hi everyone, my name is Milan Kordestani, and I'm excited to share that I have a new book coming out called Moonshot Moments. This is kind of a niche book that I created after reading a series of different pieces of literature. Some of them focused on AI, some of them focused on human evolution, some of them focused on genetic engineering. And I started to find that all of these different books were screaming about an urgent problem arising in society, which is that human evolution is going to be decided by societies and humans today. Specifically, some of the books that were really interesting were Robert Wright's Non-Zero, Max Tegmark's Life 3.0, and Bobby Azarian's The Romance of Reality. All of these books started to make me really curious about the evolution of humanity and what the future would look like. And so I decided to write a book based off of everything I was learning to kind of play around with those questions. And what I started to find were that some of the most interesting topics were about genetic engineering and this philosophical concept called transhumanism, which is concerned with technology's impact on human evolution. A few years ago, you might have heard a lot of these major leaders in AI from Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and others talking about how we need to put a pause on large AI projects. That, of course, didn't happen. We are hearing similar alarm bells today about genetic engineering, but from what I researched and was able to find in talking to people who are in this space is that the genie's kind of out of the bottle at this point in time. The cat's out the bag. We can't really go back because people are able to actually do a lot of these things in their own home. AI is so accessible to so many people. Genetic engineering is actually something you could even do in your own home now and is already being done by the wealthy people in the world, like people like Brian Johnson. We're at a point now where we have to start talking about what it would look like to create concepts like democratic transhumanism. Because while it's easy to say, no, we should stop, we shouldn't do genetic engineering, it came from a place of eugenics and could create a world where only the elite have designer babies, the reality is that it's already happening. And what's not happening is creating it accessible for everyone to be able to afford these things. It's a necessary thing for the human population to evolve into our next era. Max Tegmark calls this in his book Life 3.0. How Life 2.0 was about creating culture and society and creating language and all of the things that we have today in society, but that Life 3.0 for humans is actually going to be when technology integrates into human life. Some people call this the singularity. And so that's already starting to happen. In this book, Moonshot Moments, I kind of outlined some of the most transformative moonshot moments of human history thus far. And I talk about what led to those moments occurring. Moments like the discovery of electricity, going all the way back to the discovery of fire and what that actually meant for us as a species, and then bringing it all the way forward to modern day, where we now have AI being the most transformative thing that we have in society, and likely genetic engineering coming soon, nanobot technology, new changes in medicine and health that are going to help us live significantly longer. Within the sphere of transhumanism, the ability to have neural interfaces that are able to speak with your biology and actually have code that's running inside your brain and is able to impact how you function and think and evolve and grow old. So all of these changes that are coming about are what I call moonshot moments. These moments in time where great amounts of funding and great amounts of collaboration occurred to be able to take the species to the next level of our evolution. And all of this comes together under this vision that I have, that we have the opportunity to cultivate this new human renaissance. Humanity as a whole, our species, is the culmination of nature, the natural world of our planet, waking up and becoming conscious. Bobby Azarian, in his book The Romance of Reality, calls this meta-awareness. The Fermi paradox is this idea that if we don't know that there's other life on other planets and other places, that we have to assume that we are the smartest, most intelligent thing that exists, on this planet especially, then the idea is that nature is waking up through us. It's becoming conscious of itself. The next most important question is, well, why? Why is nature waking up? What is it trying to tell us? What does it need from us? And a lot of different theoreticians then point to climate change, or the need for the humanity and the natural world to save itself to some extent, to become a multi-planetary species and take the natural world here and populate it on other planets to preserve it in the event that our star dies or that we destroy the climate to make it sustainable for humans. So all of these different issues and philosophies and scenarios are kind of coming to a point. And that's what I wanted to talk about in this book, was kind of make people aware that this is happening. Because if you read some of these books in isolation, you might find that, okay, well, there's some concern about AI, or there's some concern about bioengineering, or there's some concern about human mental health. When you read all of these different philosophers and theoreticians and authors together, and you start to kind of combine what they're talking about, you start to find that there isn't enough cooperation among our species to be able to even address these problems and to be able to create a generally good outcome for humanity. Part of what I do in this book, I created a chapter where you get to choose your own outcomes, a choose your own adventure chapter, where individuals are basically tasked with reading a section, and then at the bottom of that section deciding to skip to a certain page to decide what the next outcome will be. Based off of your decision, you get to see how it kind of plays out for humanity. The reason why so much of this is important is because in game theory, there's this idea of zero sum, as Robert Wright would call it, which is that there's always a loser when someone else is winning, that there is a limited amount of resources, and that in order for someone to win or come up, that another must lose. But a lot of what I've been reading from these various writers is that we can't be approaching human civilization that way for very longer, otherwise it is going to result in the wealthy creating bunkers and needing to go underground while everyone else perishes from climate change. That's like a really non-ideal outcome for the majority. And so what a lot of these authors are writing about is this idea of trying to create a win-win scenario, which happens through hyper-cooperation across our species, across nations. And so what that ends up looking like is creating regulatory bodies that are interested in regulating, for example, the development of technology and AI, not just in one country, but across countries. And that becomes important when we're trying to prevent things like cyber attacks from happening, which are going to become more numerous. It also becomes important in regulating things like genetic engineering, where right now, basically nowhere on the planet are you able to genetically engineer embryos legally. But we're reaching a point in time where that's going to become necessary, where to have humans that are capable of surviving in space and going to other distant planets, we are going to need to genetically engineer people to sustain those challenging journeys. That's one of the mindsets of this book, is really that we have to teach people to be hyper-cooperative. I talk in detail about what that looks like, what it would look like to be hyper-cooperative as a society and as a species, and what it would take to accomplish that. And I back up a lot of these claims with what I've been learning and reading from these other books.